Welcome to the IPG Network. Today's discussion is buying your first investment, and our expert today is Cameron Howard. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So the first question, Cameron, I think a lot of people would be interested in knowing is, why would you buy real estate compared to other things that you can do with your money?
Well, the way I look at it is real estate is indefinite. It's always going to be there. It's not going to move. A stock is intangible, so most people like to have that definite property with them. So investing in real estate really sets the tone that you're going to have that indefinitely, and it's not going to just be a number that you're following on a board.
As a first-time investor, what would you recommend as a professional for a person to consider? What type of property?
Maybe like a small multifamily building, maybe with approximately 4 to 6 units in that building, maybe generating income based on the monthly rent that you provide. So if you spend maybe $500,000, you have $2,500 to $3,000 per month each unit in rent, and you calculate your income that way and start small.
So Cameron, in regard to an area to invest in, what would you recommend as a professional to an investor? What areas should they consider?
Well, that's a great question. I would consider something that maybe is tangible to you, maybe within an hour, maybe 50-mile radius from where you're currently residing. Therefore, if there's a problem, you're able to easily access that property.
When you have a first-time investor as a client, how do you advise them on their budget? How much money do they need? What kind of down payment?
Well, I advise them with a down payment, maybe looking upwards more of 40 to 50%. If you go a little bit lower, depending on your income, if you go a little bit lower, you may find that your seller is shopping around your deal, and you may not be a definite bet on that certain property if you go maybe towards 5 or 10%.
So Cameron, in my experience, I have found that there are two kinds of investors. Some folks want to buy real estate for the appreciation, for the quick increase. And then there are others that want something more stable, maybe a little boring, a little safer. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, with the quick appreciation, I believe that's more for the investor that likes to take more of a risk. Usually those typically tend to be a more risky property to invest in. Less risky maybe would be a slower depreciation, but over time you might project more income from that property.
So owning a piece of property has a lot of responsibilities. What are some of the pros and cons of owning an investment?
Well, I would say some of the pros of owning an investment is another income for your family, maybe another set income for you in life in general. I would say a con maybe would be the maintenance of that property. You having to be on hand in order to handle the maintenance that that property requires, you having to have the funds to fund that maintenance through the property as well. As far as a pro, I believe that you have that definite income, and you know that, as I said before, that property is tangible. It's not just a stock that's going to either depreciate or appreciate on you quickly. You know that it's pretty much set in stone, and you have that property physically.
Are there any tax benefits to owning real estate?
Yes, there are. There are quite a few tax benefits. When you file your taxes, you could itemize your properties and often find that you can be able to deduct those properties from your taxes as well.
I'm familiar with a listing broker, a real estate broker that represents the seller or the property. What is a buyer broker?
Well, a lot of people don't realize that there's two sides to the story. There's a listing broker and there's a buying broker. Both brokers act in the best interest of either the seller or the buyer. A buyer broker acts in the best interest of the buyer and will tend to negotiate the best price in order for that buyer to find the property that they're looking for.
If someone was to hire a buyer broker to help them find an investment property, to help them negotiate, do you have to pay that person?
You don't have to pay that person yourself out of pocket because that person gets paid directly from the seller of the property.
So Cameron, if you were advising a new investor, a new client, who lived in, say, the boroughs, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, the Bronx, and you were going to advise them to purchase a property, what would you recommend?
I would recommend a property, either a 2 to 3 family house, and I would probably go more with 3 family. 2 family and 3 family are very similar with each other. You want to stay away from the single family homes. This is due to the fact that you won't always have a tenant in a single family home, therefore you won't always have that definite income. But if you have a 2 to 3 unit multifamily, you have that definite income. You could either live in it or you could have 2 to 3 tenants at a time generating income for you on that property.
If a potential client approached you in regard to investing in real estate and you were going to meet with that person, what would you tell that person to bring with them, or how should they prep up to meet with someone like yourself?
I would generally advise that person maybe to provide me with tax information, maybe their previous tax return, just so I can get a general grasp on their annual salary or their gross income. I would also ask them to provide me with maybe a bank statement. Therefore, if they're looking at property that's maybe upwards of $1 million, you would like to make sure they have a healthy bank statement, and I would say of around maybe $500,000, maybe a little bit more to put that down payment on that property.
There's some controversy about investing in real estate where some folks believe that if you put less money down, 5% or 10% down, it may be better than 50% down. But what's your viewpoint on that?
I believe that if I have a client, I would specifically advise them to put a little bit more, upwards of 40 to 50% down. As I've said, if you put 5 to 10% down on a property and you put that offer in, the owner of that property is going to look at people who are putting in more and maybe shop around your deal because you're not a definite bet on that property. If you provide a higher down payment, they know that you're serious, you have the cash, and it also opens the area for negotiation for you.
So Cameron, in regard to the real estate professional, what attributes should a first-time investor look for in a real estate broker?
A first-time investor would really look for that integrity within that broker. They want to make sure that that broker is trustworthy. They want to make sure that that broker has knowledge of the area itself and also knowledge of investing in buildings and commercial. What's the difference between commercial and residential as far as investments? They want to really make sure that that broker is very savvy in the market, want to know the numbers, the interest rates, and all the variables that could possibly outstand whether you put that down payment on the property or whether you move on.
I've heard that pre-approval letters or letters from the bank are useful tools in negotiating for a first-time investment. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
I know that pre-approval is essential in the buying process. As far as a pre-approval goes, I maybe wouldn't put a specific variable on that pre-approval from the bank. Rather, have your bank specify that you've been a client with this bank for 10 to 15 years, and verify that you have the funds available to purchase the property that you're looking to invest in.
Normally, the home inspection is done after the negotiation or close to the closing, but you've recommended that a home inspection be done before negotiation. What's the purpose of that?
I believe that the home inspection should be done prior to putting in the negotiation or the offer, and this is mainly because you'll be able to have a third-party professional outsource for a small fee and get another word of advice on maybe any errors or technicalities with that property that you may not be able to see at face value. Therefore, in the future, be able to save you a couple $1,000s with the negotiation.
Cameron, you've mentioned parallel negotiating. What is that all about?
Well, parallel negotiating differs from maybe a single negotiation as you're putting in 3 separate offers on 3 different properties for your one buyer as the broker. Now, of course, this includes more work, but we're not really afraid of more work as we enjoy, really the upscale, upbeat notion of if you have 3 offers in on each property, it becomes sort of a horse race and you're watching those 3 negotiations simultaneously. Therefore, if one falls through, if you're doing it one at a time and it falls through, then you have to go and find another property. But if you have all 3 at one time and one falls through, you still have 2 more in the race, so to speak. So therefore, one is eventually going to negotiate out the way you want it, and that buyer will definitely get the property that they had their eyes set on.
There are many types of investors out in the market, and today we're talking about the first-time investor. What type of folks do you like to work with, particularly?
Well, I think we specialize in working with either first-time or the shark type investors. I predominantly like working with the shark investors because they really know what they want, they're really set forth, but I also, it's hard to say because I do like to work with the first-time investors as well, and we have the expertise to really work with either or, but when we're working with a first-time investor, we're typically more patient. We're looking around at the properties, our different options, maybe putting an offer in on a property that they really like and will take more time. But when we're looking with maybe a shark investor who really wants to get their eyes in on that one big building and that one prize and put the heavy down payment and they've been in it before, then we really have the expertise to move that transaction along quickly.
So Cameron, aside from finding these great opportunities, these great buildings to buy, what other services or what other responsibilities do you perform for your clients?
Well, as a buyer broker for my clients, we typically have an array of services that we perform. We're acting, of course, in the best interest of the buyer, disregarding maybe what the seller has to say about the property. Therefore, we'll go out to architects and engineers and really get that in-depth detail about what that property can do and how it performs. We can go to the bank with our client, maybe get the mortgage pre-approval letters for them and with them, and we act as sort of the hub and the middleman for all of these services for our clients specifically.
So Cameron, aside from finding these great buildings, these great opportunities for your buyer clients, what other services, what other responsibilities do you handle?
Well, we typically, as we're acting in the best interest of our buyer as the broker, we typically perform services such as reaching out to architects and engineers in order to make sure that that property that they're focusing on really performs the way that they're expecting it to. We might even go to the bank with our client to maybe get them a pre-approval letter for their mortgage. We act as sort of the middleman, maybe even the hub for our client, and it's at no cost to the client whatsoever.
All right. Thank you so much. That advice is very helpful.
Thank you for having me.